Brad Meltzer is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of thrillers like The Escape Artist, nonfiction books like The First Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill George Washington, gift books like Heroes for My Son and Heroes for My Daughter, and the Ordinary People Change the World series, which he's here today to discuss. Brad, nice to have you back. I went down a Brad Meltzer hole this weekend. I'll tell you where I ended up. I ended up at the University of Michigan Law School, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, you delivering a commencement address and telling the story. I think his name was Eli Siegel. What am I making reference to?
So I gave the commencement address at the University of Michigan Law School. And my first job in Washington, D.C., I love you, Michael, because I've never told this story to anyone on air anywhere. Is Eli Siegel was my first mentor, ran AmeriCorps back in the day when AmeriCorps first launched. And my first job out of law school was a speechwriter for him. And my first assignment was to write his commencement address at the University of Michigan Law School. So I get up there now 20 something years later, and I said, I've already given this address before. I can't remember anything as a 22-year-old kid, 24-year-old kid that I wrote when I wrote this speech for him, but I reread the speech and it had one line in there that jumped out. And it said, 20 years from now, one of you will be giving this commencement address, one of you lucky ones. And whoever it is will be just that, lucky. And I was the lucky one who was able to do it all those years later.
It's like out of a Brad Meltzer novel.
My wife said, it sounds like something you made up.
Yeah.
And I had to show her the speech because she almost didn't believe it. And I said, when I gave the address, I was in tears. If you look on the YouTube video of it, because, I'm a guy who was the first in my family to go to a 4-year college. I never thought I would make it to college, much less law school. And this one guy who takes a chance on me. And we all have that mentor that, was the first person who told us we were good at something, the first person who took a chance on us. If I can leave you with anything today, thank that person. Find them, track them down, and thank them. Even if they passed away, Eli's passed away a few years ago, but find their sons and daughters and thank them. I'm still in touch with his kids. We still support a scholarship in his name. But those people changed our lives, and I'm so thankful that, he took a chance on me, some kid, and said, you can write, kid, here you go. And to be able to do that and give it at Michigan and then find out that I worked on that actual speech is again, something you can't make up.
It would have been a great story if you had simply worked for someone and crafted a commencement address for them at any university or any law school. But the idea that Eli Siegel delivered a commencement address that you helped write at that law school, and now here you are having inserted the line that says 20 years from now, it could be you. I thought it was great. I thought it was almost as good, this first job out of school when you worked for this guy, almost as good as scooping ice cream in Aventura.
That's the story. That's the story that I thought you were going to ask me. It's the best story I got.
And becoming the manager. By the way, did you have the gig at 14 and then you were the manager at 16? I can't remember.
I did. I had to gave a fake birth date because I had to work. I just needed the money. So I started working in ice cream at 14. I started working at Haagen-Dazs at 15, and they made me the manager at 16. And it was, and again, it was because everyone was stealing. All the managers were stealing because they were older guys who had families to support. And so my buddy and I went and said, listen, we're 16. We're training everyone. You keep firing, and we're never going to steal from you. Why don't you make us the manager? So the guy at Haagen-Dazs in the Aventura Mall says, you know what? It's 1986. You're the manager, Brad. I'm like, okay, great. So my friend Nick and I are the managers. This woman comes up. She's snapping her fingers at me to get my attention. I said, ma'am, just wait 1 second. She's like, I want you to help me. I'm like, ma'am, just give me a second. And she starts yelling, you need to help me now. And I said, ma'am, why don't you just take your business elsewhere? We're not going to serve you here today. She's like, you're going to serve me. You better serve. I said, ma'am, I'm not serving. She goes, I want to see the manager. I said, hold on, I'll get him. I look over my own shoulder. I look back at her and I say, can I help you? And she says, you're not the manager. I said, I'm the manager because I'm a 16-year-old kid. And she says, you know what, kid? You're going to be working at this miserable Haagen-Dazs for the rest of your miserable life. And I looked her straight in the eye and I said, ma'am, if I'm working here for the rest of my miserable life, you're still never getting any ice cream. And I'm usually one of those guys, Michael, that I can't think of the good line in the moment. I think of it like 5 hours later in the shower. In that moment, I had the line. God gave me that line that day on that moment. And it just was, I used to be mad at that woman, but now I do thank that woman because she taught me how to use my drive to push myself out of that spot.
Good for you. Okay, we're not here to discuss your University of Michigan Law School commencement address, although those are great stories. Ordinary people change the world. How did this whole series come to life?
It was my kids. I was writing thrillers and mysteries, and I love doing that. Got letters from my dear friend, President Bush, may rest in peace, and, even from Bill Clinton saying they liked the books. They had invited me down to Houston and to the White House and all these places. But I had kids, and I wanted to give my kids better heroes to look up to. And, I tell my kids all the time, being a famous business person doesn't make you a hero. You got to think of someone beside yourself. And so we started with I'm Amelia Earhart, I am Abraham Lincoln. We did I am Rosa Parks. My son loves sports. I was like, you know what? Forget a millionaire overpaid athlete. What about this guy, Jackie Robinson, we did for him? And we've done now, this is the 10-year anniversary of these books. On the 10-year anniversary, we have I am Ruth Bader Ginsburg and I am Mr. Rogers. And I love the fact that for 10 years now, 7 million people have come along with us on this journey using them. And, it's a children's book series for kids, 5 to 12 years old, but just telling their stories and collecting and building libraries of real heroes for their kids and their grandkids and nieces and nephews. Your illustrator, is it pronounced Iliopoulos? Yeah, Chris Iliopoulos. He's our secret weapon. He really is. I mean, the drawings are great. There are so, and I love you for saying that because I never get to speak about him. I mean, he's the secret weapon. There are a million books that are written about Rosa Parks and Dr. King and Amelia Earhart and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But what Chris's style is as a cartoonist, because they're obviously cartoon books, it is a little bit like Charlie Brown meets Calvin and Hobbes. And that's the reason kids love the books, is they're like, oh, look at that art. Tell me more about that person. And, even when he drew for I am Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I was like, make her smaller and make the eyeglasses even bigger. Like, kids have to fall in love and realize these people are full of heart. And that's why we love all these heroes. Mr. Rogers, you'll cry when you read I Am Mr. Rogers because he makes him so lovable. So what's the process in deciding who makes the cut? I'm looking at I Am Dolly Parton. By the way, loved her in that halftime show a couple of weeks ago. Oh, my God. I Am Muhammad Ali. I Am Oprah Winfrey. I Am Pei. I Am Frida Kahlo. I Am Benjamin Franklin. I mean, you got a lot of choices, thank goodness, but how do you decide who are you giving this treatment to? Yeah, in the beginning, it was really a fame game, right? If I said to you, name your best people, most people would say Abraham Lincoln, Amelia Earhart, Rosa Parks, Dr. King. I mean, those are easy. When you get past the top 10, the truth is Chris and I and our editor, we look for what the world is kind of, what we need, what we want for our own kids. So for Mr. Rogers, I just was like, the world is just cruel right now. We're all being cruel to each other. How do I teach my kids kindness? How do I teach my kids how to be a good neighbor? So Mr. Rogers became a really obvious choice. And for the other, for the newest one, it was looking around and saying, we just feel like the world doesn't seem fair anymore. It feels like the fix is in. So how do we teach kids about injustice and how to fight for justice? So Ruth Bader Ginsburg became, okay, you can use the legal system. And there's no politics in the book. If you look at the back of the book, Sandra Day O'Connor's in there, Amy Coney Barrett's in there, Ketanji Brown Jackson's. We celebrate all of them. But I want to teach my daughter, we think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a serious Supreme Court justice. But when she's a little girl, and that's where the book really is centered, she's grown up in Brooklyn and, she just wants adventures. She wants to play tag and climb trees. But back then, girls weren't supposed to do that. Girls can't do that, they would tell her. It's her mother who breaks the stereotype, takes her to the library every Friday afternoon, says you could pick out 5 books. And her favorite books among them were books about real people. Young Ruth Bader Ginsburg loved books about Amelia Earhart, about Harriet Tubman. And there she gets the best lesson of all, which is that there's absolutely nothing that a girl can't do. I want my daughter to have that lesson. I want my sons to have that lesson. And those lessons of fighting injustice is not something she learned in law school, but it's something she learned from her mom. And so each of these books they're not even history books, they're value books. We've lost our sense of values in America, and we really got to bring those values back.
When I say so long to you in a moment, Brad, I'm going to open my telephone line and ask, okay, so here's the concept of this series, the Ordinary People Change the World series that Brad Meltzer and artist Christopher Eliopoulos are responsible for. If the premise is about whom should we educate our kids, then who deserves consideration? By the way, what's the pipeline look like? Do you already know who's coming after Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Yeah, I do. Jesse Owens comes next, because we were looking at the Olympics and said, well, we're fighting Nazis still in 2024. We're still fighting Nazis. So Jesse Owens became the obvious choice.
I'm going to ask the audience, like, who should be considered by Brad as he continues this franchise. So let's just go over some of the others who are already there. I am John Lewis. You've also got some fun stuff. I am Batman. I am Superman. Right?
We did those because we wanted some fictional ones in there to show kids the power of creativity. But most of them are obviously real people. Anne
Frank, Leonardo da Vinci, Walt Disney, Marie Curie. I love this because I saw her holding her book, I Am Billie Jean King. Like some of the people that you provide this treatment for are still with us. What has been the reaction?
It's fascinating. We've had Billie Jean King spend 2 hours on the phone with me, making sure her book was just perfect, including what color her sneakers were in every single match. She knew them. We've had Dolly Parton helped with hers. Jane Goodall helped with hers. Sonia Sotomayor helped with hers. I mean, it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg's daughter helped correct hers, and Jim Henson's family and Walt Disney, the family, weighed in on it. And it's just been incredible. The nice part is, again, there's no politics. There are some people we still agree on. And people I'm sure listening will be like, I don't like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I don't like that. Read the book and show me and tell me that this isn't something you'd want to give your grandkids. Because it's not like about, hey, here's abortion rights or not. That's nonsense. What it's about is just being a trailblazer. And the lesson of the book says, they call me a trailblazer, but the most important thing about leaving a trail is leaving tracks. That's the most important, and helping others behind you. That's what her whole book is about. Just like Sandra Day O'Connor laid those tracks for her and is featured in the book as well. So for me, I think you got to always look around and say, it's amazing to me, Michael. We never get the heroes, especially in trying moments of history. We never get the heroes we want. We get the heroes we need. And over, I can't know when I started writing this book a year and a half ago that, there's a huge section in there, a little part about anti-Semitism. I have no idea what's going to be happening in Israel a year and a half later. I have no idea that we can still talk to our kids about anti-Semitism. But suddenly, I Am Ruth Bader Ginsburg becomes a perfect way, because she's taught as a young girl that hatred, like injustice, is a fracture in society. And she's taught that you got to repair those fractures. So at this time when we're all tearing down all these institutions, we tear down our politicians, we tear down our actors, our athletes, our everything these days, you got to also, and some of them deserve it, make no mistake, but you got to also teach your kids how to build the world into a better place. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg learns that from her mother, and that's not something she learns in law school. She learns it from mom. And that's what these books are to me, is a way to teach our kids how to rebuild the world into a better place.
The franchise is called Ordinary People Change the World. If you go to bradmeltzer.com, you're also going to learn about his very charitable streak. He and his wife, Corey, salute you for that as well, and I wish you good things. If we come up with good suggestions, I'll make sure I forward them, okay?
Email them. That's how we get. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the number one request we got from
Really?
kids. Number one, bar nothing. And the only one before that was Mr. Rogers and then Frida Kahlo. And that's why we literally listen to people. So when email me, I know you and I email, but email me who people say. I'm very curious.
Okay.
That's how we find them.
Good luck, Brad. Thank you for dropping by to discuss this.
Thank you, my friend. As always, you are the best at research. I love it every time.
Thank you for saying that. Brad Meltzer, ladies and gentlemen.